This episode is brought to you by Bound Hat Company. Discover Bound Hat Company, where high-quality hats meet a greater purpose. Each hat is designed not only for style, but also to give back, with proceeds supporting charities like the PTSD Foundation of America. Whether for the outdoors or everyday wear, Bound Hat Company has the perfect hat for any occasion. Shop now at www.boundhatco.com and join the movement to support veterans and meaningful causes. Bound Hat Co. Style that makes a difference.
The following podcast discusses sensitive topics. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is struggling, call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline for 24/7 confidential support.
Welcome to Survival in the Trenches, Life Beyond Loss, a podcast where we share the powerful stories of those who have faced extraordinary loss and found the strength to push forward and triumph. These are real journeys of resilience, courage, and hope. Join us as we uncover what it means to rise above, even in the darkest of times.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Survival in the Trenches. My name is Kelly Chandler. I will be your host. Today, we are honored to sit down with Nick Smith. He is the Deputy Chief at the Monarch Fire Protection District. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're here to discuss with you both your personal story as it relates to tragic loss and how you have been able to also manage grief and trauma within your professional life. Before we get into the professional side of things, what we like to do for our listeners is take a little step back in time and talk about you as a person, where you grew up and what you wanted to be when you grew up. So we'd love to start there if you'd like to.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a typical 80s kid, North County, but St. Louis. I grew up in Florissant, lived there for 20 years. We were the kids that jumped on our bikes and were gone from sun up to sundown, and that was the key to come back in. Middle-class childhood, and my father was a firefighter. My mother worked in education and a couple other professions as well. She was a sign language interpreter and did a number of different service-type jobs. So yeah, I grew up there, and I wanted to be anything other than a firefighter, paramedic, to be honest with you. My dad was gone a lot, but he was also home a lot. So it was just, it was a little different. Our holidays looked a little different than other people's. Sports games were a little bit of a bigger challenge because it wasn't always available. But when he was there and involved, so I was grateful for that. We had a big group of friends that, got into some trouble here and there, but for the most part were good kids. Through high school, I went to college. I ended up at the University of Missouri, and I was studying business. And I had my heart set on becoming a marketing professional, and I was going to go out into the business world and do my own thing. And right about my junior year or so, 9/11 happened. And it was a real life-changing event, shocking for everybody, but for me in particular, it really made me sit back and reevaluate what my goals were in life and where I wanted to be. So, I had a couple of decisions to make, and one of those was, I probably should finish when I started with school and then figure it out from there. What I learned is that when you get out of business school, and if you are a marketing major, that doesn't mean that you get to go do marketing. That means you get to go do sales. And I didn't really want to do sales. And they said, well, you can get your master's, or you can just do the sales job and work your way up. And I decided to take a small break and decided to try something different. I knew I wanted to give back, and so the path that I knew the best was that of a firefighter. And so I started EMT school and fell in love with it and got through that as quickly as I could to get a job, because I graduated college. I was ready to have my own life and start making money. So that's kind of what got me into the field in the early 2000s.
Wow. So What was your family thinking at this point? Your dad especially, who was in the field.
Yeah, and spoiler alert, I ended up working at the same department as my dad. So I have over the years got to hear the stories that he got to tell at the kitchen table about his son that just, did this great job in college and had done all these things, and then, you know, but now he's going to EMT school and he wants to be one of us. So there were some difficult conversations there because I think he just wanted more for me and wanted a different life, and he knew what I was getting into, and I think he was protective for me in that way. But, you know, I was young and full of energy and ready to go give my part back to the world. I played sports all the way through high school and through college, and I loved being part of a team. I loved having a common effort with other people and a common mission. And it all just circled right back to what, you know, he was doing, being a firefighter, and he was my idol. You know, my dad he was and still is, you know, the person that I always wanted to be. And so I was like, yeah, I'm doing this whether you like it or not, and I'm going to do it really, really well. So I tried. I don't know if I did that entirely, but, you know, it's big shoes to fill. So I did my best.
Absolutely. And I think I absolutely remember 9/11, and we were pregnant at the time with our first son, and I remember thinking, what kind of world are we bringing this child into? So I completely understand where you're coming from. It redirected a lot of thinking, and especially for someone that had that in their background through your family,
Right.
You had that calling, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't have like sign-ups at front of class to go to war at that moment, because, you know, at that age, you're just ready. You know, you're like, okay, that wasn't okay. Something's got to happen. And although that is, you know, one great regret in my life that I didn't get a chance to serve the country in that way, this was one way I could give back, at least domestically.
So, which is amazing. I think that takes a lot, and it takes that fortitude to know that you can serve a higher calling, a higher purpose, and you decided to completely shift your career goals and your life in a different direction,
Yep.
Albeit at the, you know, maybe a little bit of hesitation from your father, which I understand, because he understands what comes with the job, and that's a lot of why we're sitting here today.
Right, yep.
So how old were you at this point?
Well, let's see, I would have been about 23 when I got into, when I first got into the service. And so I started my career, went directly from EMT to paramedic school, and started working at several different departments in the area, some rural, some urban, and to just kind of get my feet wet and figure out where I was going to land. And with, as far as a fire district, I knew I wanted to be a firefighter, but early on in this profession, typically you start off in the EMS side of things. It's in the emergency services world, it's 70% of what the fire department does is EMS work. It's just sort of been the evolution of things. But if you want to get to that other side, you've got to be really proactive in what you're doing and stand out above the rest. When I was getting into it, it was nothing for you to be competing against 100 other people for one job. That's changed over the years a little bit, but it's incredibly difficult. And they're raising the bar constantly in our profession. I mean, the kids coming out today are way more challenged and way better trained than I ever was. And a lot of ours had to be on the job, kind of figuring things out. These guys are coming in and they're sharp. So it's definitely been an evolution in the last 20 years.
Interesting. And so that's great for the civilians out there, but it's harder for the people that are trying to get in the field. It takes a lot of, I'm sure, hard work and dedication to stand above the rest if it's that competitive.
Yeah, just to get into the field alone, it takes an effort and a sacrifice to go out and fall on your face, because the job is extremely humbling by nature. The minute that you think you know your stuff really well, the job finds a way to pick out your weakness and exploit it, whether it be a really sick person in a way that you didn't recognize, or an event, fire, a collapse, a rescue of some kind, where you're sitting there scratching your head saying, yeah, they didn't go over this in class, and kind of learn on the fly. So it's a great job to help grow you personally and professionally, and I think that's why, you know, even as civilians walking around, you know, people have told me before that, you know, they can spot a firefighter and they can spot it's just the way that they carry themselves, and I think that's correct. I think it molds you into a certain type of person, which is good.
I think that is great.
Most times.
Yeah, right. Sure, depending on your experiences, et cetera, and how you manage yourself. But, coming from someone that has a family of bankers and business people, and I have a business degree, I don't have that knowledge or experience in the area of your day. You're signing up for something different every single day. You're not showing up to work and doing spreadsheet work or whatever the case is in business or other industries. It's a wild card. Yeah. And how do they prepare you for that and the things that you're going to come upon that are extremely traumatic and things that you're witnessing at a very young age?
Yeah. I think there's so much to learn in terms of the mechanics of the job. At the end of the day, on the medicine side of things, you're looking to determine whether somebody is sick or whether they're injured and whether they need to go. That's the simplest way that you can put our job. But there are, you don't really get classes in high school. You don't get, 5-6 years of preparation to kind of understand how the body works to the point where you're ready to go out and do this. Basically, you need a high school degree and then you're in. So a lot of people are learning the human system from the ground up. So there is a mechanic side of it where just like when you bring your car in and it's rattling like this and the smoke coming out is this color and you're going, yeah, that doesn't seem right. It's one of those things like, oh yeah, in the book it said this. And then there's kind of an evolution there where you recognize that there's a human side to the job too. And that they teach you through clinical, so just being on site and being with patients and actually seeing them. So you get this didactic classroom portion where you're practicing the practical skills and the diagnosis part. And then you've got this other side where you're out in the field, either in the hospital or in the ambulance, and you're learning the job, which is totally different because you're dealing with people. And so, that's getting through a lot of the fluff to get what is exactly happening in that moment is something that you definitely have to learn on the job. There's no other way to do it. And I would say the same thing for the fire side. You can learn everything that you need to know in the book about building types and hose sizes and flow capacity. You name it. You can learn that, but there's a feel for the job, and it's one thing to understand the skills aspect. It's another to understand what you need to apply in that moment in order to be effective. And then there's another level above that that I think very few people get to, where it's like you're not just applying the skills and the approach, but you're really coming with an overall kind of what speed am I taking this at, with which urgency am I taking it to, solve the problem. We're problem solvers, and every problem is a little bit different. But understanding all of the other side of things is extremely important. But just like we're looking at somebody might look at a car and understand just by sound what's going on with it. We get to the point where with humans we can kind of gain the same things, and as a firefighter you get enough repetitions and you start to see the way that the smoke is coming out, the color of it, the size of the building, the age of the building, the type of alarm that came in. You start to put those pieces of the equation together and learn how to best affect the situation.
So the wild card is really probably that human experience. It's not anything textbook. It's dealing with what is happening in that very critical moment, the trauma that is, I can only imagine what you're dealing with, and the visual trauma and the sounds and all of that's going on, and then the people surrounding the trauma. What training is there for that? Is there training that exists, or is it literally just on the job? You're shadowing, how does that work?
I think that you figure out pretty quickly in this profession whether or not you are able to handle the shock part of it. You get exposed to things early in your career, whether it's during your clinical phase or even just early on the job. You get handed things and you determine how you're going to handle that. And the job is not for everybody. And that is not a weakness to say, yeah, this is not for me. I can totally understand. Actually, I respect people, and I have some good friends that got to the point where it's like they got really close, and then in the end they were like, dealing with people in these situations is extremely challenging, and I don't want that for my life. And I respect that, because I think a lot of people do stick it out and they struggle. So as far as training goes, it really is kind of, let's see how you do, and then the culture hopefully around you will help guide how you process it. Now that can be good or bad. And it is somewhat dependent on who you work for and where you work and how the people there manage it. But I will say in large part that the fire service we're very much alike in a lot of ways in the way that we manage these situations, and we do check in on each other. And we run a tough call and something happens. We have this sacred ground called the kitchen table that we like to come back to and have that opportunity to decompress. Sometimes not directly, sometimes it's indirectly over dinner. And you make a comment about how that food reminds you of something that you just saw, and then you laugh it up. It's humor that you wouldn't share with the masses, but it's definitely one of the ways that we help each other to get through it. Make us, like you say, sometimes I think the saying is, if you can't laugh about it, sometimes, or if you can't, so you're either going to laugh about it or cry about it. And I think it's good to be able to share those experiences with others and talk about it. And if things are really bad, if it's a really outside the box call that happens, we have critical incident stress debriefing. Which is a whole other challenge for firefighters, but just sit around in a big circle and talk about what you felt about the call, what you seen, what you heard, what you smelled. It's trying to gather, it's trying to let you express some of those feelings, to try to take that trauma and kind of at least put it in a box. Trauma when it happens, whether it's to you or it's happening to somebody else in front of you. It sort of redirects itself throughout your brain in different positions. At least that's how it's explained to me. And my understanding is that, and this is not my clinical field, but my understanding is that left in that, shotgun spray of, senses all over your brain, as those things pop in, or you smell a similar smell, or you see a similar sight, or you run a similar call, that can bring back those memories. So I think whatever you can do to try to pull together the event afterwards is super helpful.
So as you're, throughout your career, you're evolving to process these things, and you have your own personal stories of trauma. Is there anything you can share with how you personally dealt with it, and how you started to take it on when you first started as a young person, and how you grew within that field, and what that's meant for you over time, like as you continue to process all these things that you see and feel and hear?
Yeah. Early on, I think you learn pretty quickly that you have to wear a mask. You have to put on a face. You have to be a professional. I mean, that's who we are. That's what we're called to do, and whatever the situation is. And when you do that, you create a separate space in your brain for those events. And it's a way to get through the difficult times in the moment, and to say, yes, this is hard, but this isn't me. This is somebody, who I'm here to help. If I don't help them, there's nobody else here to help. And I think that in and of itself always helped me to say, look, if I don't get this done, it's not getting done. And I think that gives you a framework to work from in order to get whatever accomplished needs to be done. The challenge over time is that it's being able to take that mask off as a kind of problem solver that's sort of a little bit disconnected from their own personal emotions while they're dealing with these tragedies. It's being able to take that off when you come home and then spend your next 4 days living your normal life. And sometimes that bleed over is where I think people fall into some of the troubles that you see in our industry in terms of accumulated stress or a particular event that's very stressful. And, as it goes further down the line of mental health issues, it can lead to addiction problems and unfortunately suicide and way too often of the event. So it's something that we have to be mindful of at all times and constantly be aware of how we're showing up at work and at home, and recognizing, having people around you, the men and women that I work with and worked with over the 20 years, when something bad happened, people were following up with me. People were calling me. You try to extend that to other people along the way. So, as far as an evolution goes, once you kind of start working through that shock and awe phase of like, wow, I've never seen that before, or I've never seen this, that you start to accumulate the tools that you need to at least get through the moment, and hopefully beyond that at home as well. But it's definitely a challenge.
I can imagine. So let's talk about some of your personal examples, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure.
Of things that you've witnessed, and you can go into detail as little or as much as you want to, and how it's impacted you either in that moment or over the years, and how you are processing that years down the line.
Yeah, so we all, anybody that's in the field will tell you they have their calls. They have that group of calls that they stick around for whatever reason. And sometimes it's not the ones that you would think they are. Sometimes it's things that you didn't expect. You don't get to decide what calls stick around, or what patients, or what scenarios that you were encumbered with. That's a little bit out of your control as far as I'm aware. So early in my career, I had a tragic call, again, probably 24 years old, and is for the birth of a child who was not at term, and was with a mom that, obviously is very distraught, but something that happened in a bathroom. It's all the tough things that you hope that don't happen to you, because it's not in the textbook of how to deal with that and all that comes with it. And it's not just mom, it's baby, and it's you, and it's your partner, and it's family, and it's all of these things that you're trying to manage. And I knew that call stood out to me just because I thought about it a lot afterwards. And obviously I'd never been around, had any situation like that. So that one was one that stuck around, and I was too young and dumb to think about dealing with it. And, in a totally different but unrelated scenario down the line, my wife and I were pregnant with twins in 2014, and they had what was called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So their hearts were connected with blood flow in a way that was unhealthy for the kids. One was getting too much fluid, one was not getting enough. They recognized the problem when, my wife just said, I just think I'm too big. And, I didn't, you're having twins. I didn't know what to expect. So after seeing a couple of doctors and getting to the specialist, they recognized what was going on. They had to perform a surgery in utero. And during that surgery, so we believe that she got an infection, and we lost the twins at just, around 6 months or just about over. But that experience of loss was unimaginable, number one, but the specifics, which I won't get into entirely, but it was extremely difficult to go through childbirth when, after the fact, and then to deal with that. And my wife was unbelievable. She was a rock, and we got through that, but it changes you. And that whole event, parts of it brought back that call. Was like, whoosh. It was like I was there in the bathroom from 10 years previous, and it was just amazing how that can happen. And luckily with us, we had a group of good people that surrounded us. We had a church community that was there for us, like literally and physically. They, they were phenomenal, and really, that event allowed us to really embrace our faith in a way that we had not done before, and that sustains us today. Being saved is well, I would consider the greatest gift that I've ever received in my life, and the way that it came or was strengthened was not ideal for anybody, but that's the way it happened for us. And that transition after that back to work made me a different person in a lot of different ways. And learning to deal with grief on a personal level helped me to understand what my coworkers may be going through, not only in their personal lives, but what these families are going through. And it allows you to develop this language that allows you to communicate in a way to communicate, in a way to be present that I had never known. So, this personal loss, which we just celebrated, what would have been their 10th birthday, we're sitting around and saying, look what's come from this. And it's pretty amazing when you look back on it. So that was kind of a seminal moment in our personal lives that really did have an impact and helped me to understand, okay, I need help beyond the firehouse table on this one. I've got to find the right way to help myself to be healthy and to get through this, as did my wife. And we worked together on that, and learned a lot about the healing process through that. And I think it was extremely applicable to the job in many senses. So I'm grateful for what I learned during that time.
And first and foremost, I'm extremely sorry for your loss.
And the other thing that we came to know is that there's so many other people who have gone through this, and you have no idea because people don't talk about it. But people lose pregnancies, viable pregnancies, way more often than we ever knew. And until we found out, until this happened to us, that was never known. It created some special connections with other folks and that dealt with similar things. So again, it was something that shaped who we are, and I think that's the gift that we receive from that, because I'm able to help other people to kind of traverse those challenges in some small way anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, you're in a position of first of all, let's step back. How many fire departments or organizations are you involved with? Like, how much influence? I mean, you're over in a large amount of people, right?
Yeah. So in St. Louis County, the Monarch Fire Protection District covers about 62 square miles. We have about 80 to 90,000 residents. We have 5 engine houses, so we have a little bit of urban, a little bit of rural. We have a mix of different things. But in St. Louis County overall, there's 43 different fire entities. So it can be challenging in some ways to have a common method to help people when these things happen, or even knowledge that they're happening, because if they happen at small departments and they may have less resources, and we're very lucky to have the resources that we do have and the amount of people that we have to lean on. I think as an organization, we've been through a lot. We've had loss. I've personally been a part of 3 different funerals of firefighters who died in the line of duty, all unfortunately due to cancer, and it was not something that they train you on, again, how to deal with a grieving spouse and their kids and their family members. They don't teach you that. But that is what makes me the most proud to work where I work, because we have come together on so many occasions to be there in those quintessential moments for these people and their families. And hopefully we continue to train and work and try to prevent these things from happening for the future generations. So they didn't lose their lives for no reason. We think about them and we talk about them, and they're part of our culture. And even outside of those, we've had other tragic incidents with sick children or catastrophic injuries where guys have stepped up and worked for people for an entire year just to cover their paycheck, and longer in some instances. So we have a very special group of people and a very great culture, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say how much that means to me and my family to know if we come upon tragedy, we've got 100 other families that are there standing with us to help. So we're very grateful for that, and that's how we make this thing work.
And the reason I was asking is because you, having been a witness to trauma and then experienced your own personal loss and trauma, you are really in a very unique position that you've been on both sides, and you can share that knowledge and the need for the mental health services to help those that are in your line of work to be the best person they can be. I mean, I think, obviously it's a horrible tragedy that you've been through, but you've been able to turn that tragedy into purpose, and you're able to act as an advocate for all the webs you weave throughout these departments and the people you're touching. I think that in a way is a blessing, despite all the hard stuff that you've been through.
Yeah, I agree. My wife is such a tremendous influence on me in terms of healing and helping others and being there for others. That's her gift, and so I've learned a ton from her on that as well, and going through what we went through. But there's some things that you just don't really know how to handle until you have to handle it. And being there to help others to go through that is it's a blessing to me to be able to give back in that way. I feel like I owe it to, those three guys that I was talking about, their families and other families as well. I have been so grateful to have been part of a group through the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation called the Comfort Zone Camp for Kids. It's a bereavement camp for kids that have lost a parent in the line of duty, and it is just a life-altering event to be able to go and sit down with three days straight in a bubble with these kids, and just to see how resilient they are, and to see tragedy at such a young age is unspeakable and affects generations along the way. And to be able to been able to walk with some of these kids around, that's been a huge gift too. And this kind of stuff is what really opened me up to it. So, I'm the beneficiary of all of that. This isn't, me doing anything special. This is the people and the things that have come into my life that have made it better.
Such a great attitude. And I feel like you're in a position to really make a difference because of all your experience and your attitude at how you've taken all of your life experiences and been able to share it and help others grow and learn and face these challenges. If in a perfect world you could provide additional services or think of ways that would help your staff or the people that are thinking about coming into the field, what does that look like? What additions would you like to have added into the training or on the other side, the therapy that's offered? What are some ideas that you've thought through or talked about with others?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we tend to be more reactive than proactive as people. We wait for a call and then we go to it and solve the problem, right? So I think what we're seeing in the field at large is some really great strides to bring these mental health issues that we face to the forefront, because sometimes it's not the big call, it's just the repetitive nature of the small call. When football players, when they talk about CTE and these things, and the linemen banging their heads together, it's not always the big hit that does it. Sometimes it's the repetitive nature, and you don't get to decide which hit is the last straw, and we're potentially could break you, and or at least put you in a position to feel broken. And I think that the industry is evolving from a reactive standpoint into more of a proactive standpoint. And I do hope and wish that as time goes on, and I know that, for instance, the St. Louis County Fire Academy and some of the paramedic schools that are out there, they do their part in trying to make people aware of these issues that are going to come upon them along the way. But yeah, in an ideal world, months of training on this is how you prepare yourself physically for this job. This is how you prepare yourself mentally. This is how you prepare yourself emotionally. You know, you could have semester-long classes on these things to really understand and give practical advice on how to combat those challenges and how to stay physically, mentally, and emotionally fit, because there's 3 different categories, and if you let one of those get out of whack, it's going to affect the other 2. So I think it's about trying to educate people that you can be proactive. I think some of the resources that are out there can almost be too much. So if in an ideal world, I would say we would add another semester on to paramedic school. Sorry, students, but the fire academy, I would really expand that and allow them to start talking early on about their tragedies or their experiences or their challenges in a way that's meaningful for later in the career, so they know how to deal with it. But the biggest thing that we can do as an industry is to continually help people that come in before they need help. In the fire service, we have something called a mayday, and that's when you don't know what to do. You're in a position of you're trapped, you need help, and you call mayday. And one of the things that they teach you is don't wait too long to call mayday. You need to call mayday when you think you might need to call mayday, and you have to repress that ego that's telling you you're okay, you're fine, you're going to figure this out. If you say something, they're going to laugh at you. If you're lost inside that house, you're off the hose line, and you can't see your hand in front of your face, you got to call now before the low air alarm goes off, because then it's going to be too late to get to you. It's the same thing, when we're talking about mental health too. You got to call mayday before it's too late, before somebody can get there and actually help you.
That's critical because, well, for 2 reasons. One, we as civilians that expect people like yourselves to come on the scene, we expect you to be on it, right? Yeah. We want you to be all of those things: physically fit, mentally fit, emotionally fit. Otherwise, who are we going to rely on when we're frantic and in crisis? Mm-hmm. Number 1, obviously. And then number 2, and which is even equally important, is you're seeing and expressing that there are real issues with suicide rates and things happening with people in your types of roles. So stepping into your world for a day, a week, a month, a year, what are some of the things that you can share with our listeners about what you witness? What are some of the things that are traumatic to you and that you have seen? And feel free to share as little or as much as you feel you're able to.
Yeah, while it's different every day, it has the same smell. Like, sometimes the calls, although each and every one of them is independent and different, it has, a lot of them have a similar feel. 70-80% of what we do is customer service. We're out to solve people's problems and to be there empathetically for somebody. But at a typical engine house, they and typically we work a 48-hour shift in St. Louis County. They're on for 48 hours and then they're off for 96 hours, and then the cycle repeats. So during that 48 hours, it's not untypical to run 15 to 20 EMS calls per ambulance, and then maybe 5 to 6 fire-related calls, whether it's alarms or rescues and other things. So you are getting called out to, at a pretty regular rate, and it depends a little bit where you work. We're not the busiest department. We're also not the slowest department. We're sort of in the middle. But yeah, it depends a little bit on your community, the community that you serve in terms of the types of calls that you see. But a lot of, are people that are chronically ill, or, sometimes they're acutely ill with things. There's trauma of all kinds, whether it's vehicle or hanging your Christmas lights and falling off the roof, or, any number of things that you can get yourself into. We've found people there. So it's hard to say what a typical day looks like, because each day is a little different. But you have to be prepared for everything, and I think that's the hard part. And a lot of our day is outside of running calls is focused on training for those events. When it comes to a difficult EMS call, say a cardiac arrest, it's determining the viability of the patient, where the patient is at, how we're going to get to the patient to a position where we can work them, and then put our craft to work and with the resources that we have in the fastest way possible. Sometimes you're surrounded. Sometimes last week they were in a lobby of a doctor's office. So sometimes you've got multiple other medical professionals or in a waiting room full of people. It's happened on ball fields. So it can be very public. It can also be very private, where the Meals on Wheels person came over and the person didn't answer the door and they were concerned, and you have to break the door in and figure out what's going on there. Our dispatch does a phenomenal job at trying to deduce exactly what is going on prior to us getting there, but until you're there, you really don't know. We focus on trying to remain prepared for whatever it gives us, but it's not uncommon to have to go through a uniform change or two because you've gotten some sort of bodily fluid on you, or you have a ripped article of clothes. You're constantly interjecting yourselves into other people's trauma of some sort on the EMS side of things. The fire side of things. When we get a fire call, it is, today's building types are, they're built to burn, unfortunately. They're very good against the wind, and they're very efficient, and they're built as cheaply as they possibly can, but they don't withstand fire very well. So today's generation of homes don't last very long once a fire's begun. So it's even more important now that we're on our game for that. But you may deal with severely burned patients, and you may deal with, people stuck in positions that are already deceased, and it's a recovery situation. Every day is a little bit different, but it's the people that we're trying to help. That's always the focus.
Once you get that call, can you walk us through an example of what that is like from start to finish?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give you an example. And again, while I was on the fire truck a couple years back, serving in the role of a captain at the time, we responded to a motor vehicle collision. Not an uncommon call for us, but the notes are always a little bit telling. If there's more information on there that kind of leads you to believe that this is a heightened sense, and this indicated that the car was severely damaged, that there was heavy damage. So we knew that we were going to be going to work. So you gear up, you're rushing to the scene as quickly as you can. Given the apparatus that you're on, you have to determine how you will position yours depending on the tools that you have, and how you want to block traffic and protect yourself from this. And in this particular instance, there was a vehicle which I would describe as almost unrecognizable in terms of it looked like a giant wadded up ball of plastic and metal, and it was more or less inside of a giant, like, neighborhood size tree or bush. And on our arrival, you're immediately trying to figure out, how many patients do I have, and what is their status, and how am I going to get them out? And and then also what fluids are around and what other hazards exist that I have to protect our guys from that are going to be rushing in there. What other units do I have coming? What help do I need? So in this instance, as we approached, the first truck that got there had access to the driver's side compartment through it was on its side, but it was over the top. They were able to open the door pretty easily and removed a deceased, 18-year-old kid out of the car. And so that's happening, and you're wondering, okay, what else is there to this? Is this a single car accident? Is there multiple cars? Was there other occupants? What else do we have here? And so as we were evaluating the car, there was a second car involved, but it was much further down the road. But this car, when we came up to it, I could hear a sound inside of the car, and I could see just one little lock of hair hanging out. So, you talk about things that you see that you don't, like, for whatever reason, that I keyed it in, I was like, there's another person in here, and, I don't know how they're still in there and they're making noise. And, you know, through a very lengthy and difficult extrication, we were able to get this girl out, and she was alive more or less than we got there. And I was connected and talking with her and trying to keep her safe while we're coming up with a plan, trying to keep her airway open from where she sat while the guys are operating, you know, these heavy tools and twisting steel and doing all these things around you. You create a fast connection with somebody in those moments. Through a lot of hard work for some very talented people, we were able to pull her out and sort of on top of me in that moment. But she was alive, but barely. And so then we transition into the other side of our job, which is, you know, EMS it's not the same job, but, you know, they call for the same reasons. They need help. So you shuck off all that side of the job, and then you go on to this side of the job, and we take her to the hospital and trying to keep her alive and doing all the interventions that we're doing on her, trying to assess her for what injuries that she has, and knowing that she started awake and is now not, trying to focus on, you know, the most important aspects of care for her and letting the hospital know that we're on the way. You know, she ultimately, although before I left the hospital that night, the doctor had drawn blood and said her blood work is incompatible with life, is how he described it, but she's still alive. So that kind of told a story that, you know, she's not going to make it out of this. And so, you know, we kind of gather ourselves back up, and we're, you know, you got a mess to clean up in the back of the ambulance. And, you know, you take a deep breath, but you know that you got to get it cleaned up, restocked, and get ready for the next one. This young woman actually made it through. And, you know, I mean, by the grace of God, she lived and wanted to meet us. And I've been able over the last couple of years to have at least some sort of connection with this person that, you know, I thought for sure was dead. But again, she's grieving. She's lost her best friend, and it's, you know, then you're walking her through that tragedy. So, you know, that's one call, one night, one shift, and these things are happening every day around the county and the state and everywhere else. And that, you know, as lucky as we were to be able to get her out while she was alive, and I get to have the conversations with her on occasion, or she drops by the firehouse. There's a lot of people that you don't get that opportunity. And, you know, death gets a vote, unfortunately, and you can't save everybody. And so that's also another, you know, tough thing that we deal with. You can't save everybody, but you just got to live to fight the next day. And we've got to, you know, make sure that our people are preparing themselves to go back out and do that job again that night. And the resiliency that they show when they do that it's pretty inspiring.
And you can see and understand why people would have a very difficult time dealing with that day in and day out if you're never addressing that trauma. You are really packaging it up and putting it away for another time. That seems like it's a recipe for disaster. So I think the storytelling is so important, and I think that kitchen table concept is amazing. I'm sure that there are other ways that it could be expanded to help with this overall. I just feel like, as someone who doesn't know many people in this field, like, those stories just bring out a lot of empathy and awareness in me that until we had our conversation on the phone, I never thought of the person that's on scene. I think they're doing their job, goodbye. I mean, you don't usually have that connection. It's always about the tragic event. So it really puts into perspective that you're doing this day in and day out, and it has to have an impact on your brain.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You know, I mean, it wasn't that much longer after that we had a tragic fire call, and our company was the first one in, and it was a condominium that was on fire, and literally the caller was in the bathroom on the phone with dispatch saying, you know, it's getting hotter in here and I can't breathe very well, and the dispatch is relaying to this. And just to be able to take that and put it aside and you know, to do your job. And my guys, they did a phenomenal job. The companies, the other departments, everybody that came together. I mean, looking back on some of the tactics and things that you did, you're always going to second guess yourself. You're always wondering, you know, could I have done something differently or shouldn't have? But, you know, I unfortunately in that scenario, despite, you know, making some tremendous progress on this fire and making entry, when we eventually found her, it was too late. And, you know, I didn't get to know her. I didn't get to, you know, connect after that. I didn't get to talk to her. I didn't get any of those things. But, you know, like I said, the fire gets a vote too. You know, they're not at the table planning what's about to go down at this event. You know, we can train all we want, but these things happen. And that perspective just takes time to develop. But it's, you know, both of those calls are things that I live every day of my life.
And so you're dealing not only with trauma, but there's a lot of times a lack of closure. Like there's not closure from the standpoint of, obviously if someone passes away, that's closure in a sense, but you don't always know what happens to these people. It's kind of this lingering, like, who knows what happened unless you get that contact. I think that's another tough element, is not knowing what's going on with the people you help save or serve or whatever the case may be. And so those two things at play, I'm sure it's a challenge for your mind. Yeah,
very much. It's tough to fit all that into a specific place in your brain that you can access when you want to. And I think that's important. I think that you should have access to those things, but it shouldn't always be open and running in the background. Mm-hmm. And I can't say enough about the people that we work with and the way that you know, they're there for each other. It's really the key to our success. For a healthy career, because we're all going to get damaged in some way. We know that going into this, whether it be physically, mentally, emotionally, nobody walks away from this job unscathed. They just don't. And I think that recognizing that early on can help prepare you for the inevitable difficulties you're going to face down the line.
And I love your idea of that additional upfront training, like being prepared instead of reacting to things that your mind isn't ready for. I think that's a great concept. I think that's something that in your shoes with both witnessing trauma and experiencing trauma, you could help advocate for. You know, I don't know what type of changes are required to get something like that done. Is it at like the state level, just your department level, or how does that even work with the licensing process? Is that very localized, or is that more state, national? How does that work?
Yeah, a lot of it's state licensure type of stuff, but you know, I think really it comes down to culture. It comes down to where you work. It comes down to the kind of atmosphere that is the day-to-day life. I mean, you're living with these people for 48 hours at a time for a third of your life. So they're going to be the biggest influence on you. As far as getting the training for them, you know, the only challenge with that is, honestly, I mean, and it is super important, but I can't take my, 43-year-old brain and put it in a 23-year-old's head and say, these are the things you need to be thinking about. They're in a different phase of life. A lot of them are invincible, and we need that too. I need that part of them. But providing the tools and being there when they need it is what's important, and let them know that there's tools available.
And you're absolutely right. Like the younger ones, you need them. You're beat up, right?
Yeah.
like my age, you've taken your hits. You've been through the ringer, but you need that younger energy. Like, I'm going to go save the world, kind of like you had at 9/11, right?
Yeah.
I think that is very important and valid. While also you could, do preventative or proactive rather, training. Speaking of that, I'm going to cheat and look at my phone because I have two mutual friends that are married, and they have a daughter that just got her EMS license. And I wanted to know what kinds of questions they have, knowing that their daughter is signed up for this life. Mm-hmm. And naturally, they're curious about the impacts it's going to have on her long term. So
sure.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I have a couple of mutual friends who have a daughter who is getting into the field. She has a license already. She's working on her associates, and then she will attend full paramedic school. And I said, what questions would you have as a parent that we could ask you? one question they had regarding their daughter and how she's going to experience this going forward is, what is the burnout rate of paramedics in the first couple of years?
Yeah, there's a life cycle to this job, just like anything else. And if her focus is strictly on EMS, it's not the first couple of years. It really, you have an excitement for the job because you're seeing the book come to life. And there'll be all of these firsts for her. The first time that she goes to a hospital clinical or an ambulance clinical, or that she, the graduating from school, the obtaining the next license, the getting the first part-time job or full-time job, running your first call as a paramedic. There's a lot of firsts that happen in those first couple of years. And, my experience has been with that those people are the ones that you need to engage as quickly as possible to continually learn. I think having a bend towards always looking towards professional development and trying to learn more, and going back after you run a call and trying to figure out, maybe what you missed, those sorts of things. There's an excitement for that. I think your brain, anytime you're doing anything new, it's a real opportunity to really get engaged. So rarely do I see that in the first couple of years. Your practice changes as well. The way that you practice medicine and over the first 5, 6, 7 years, you really start to develop who you're going to be as a clinician. And then there's a period of time where, it's a little bit more of a grind for some people. They see the same patients or the same types of patients and the same types of calls. And I think if you're not actively trying to get better at the profession, I think it can become a little bit monotonous, and you can be more susceptible for some of these trauma type things or burnout. There's places in our area that run a ton of calls. They go to work and they're on the truck running calls more than they're in the engine house or ambulance base, period. And that brings me to the next important point, which is get rest. And that's easier said than done, but having the shifts that we work, whatever kind of shift work that you're doing, whether it's night shift, day shift, all that, sleep is such a huge component of your overall health. So trying to make up for sleep is one of the things that I think is extremely important, if there is such a thing. But those are some of the things I would say to avoid burnout early on. I know that wasn't exactly the question, but I would say keep learning, keep pressing forward in your understanding of things, keep engaging your brain early on, and really keep yourself physically fit. I think about 25% of career-ending injuries happen in the first couple of years, maybe even the first year. And it may not take you out that first year, but eventually it will as time goes on, potentially. So we all have that superhero feeling at the beginning, but the reality of this job is you're lifting and moving giant bags of water all day long. Not to oversimplify things, but it's not it's a rigorous job. So maintaining physical fitness, knowing your limitations, when to ask for help, all that can help prevent burnout, which I think is probably a better way to look at it.
It's great advice. Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you for that. I think they have a few more questions. What resources do agencies have for medics that are having a hard time after seeing a specific trauma?
So we most agencies will have EAP. So if you need immediate help, a stopgap, and a lot of them offer, various sorts of counseling covered by their insurance, which I think is important, and that's becoming more available even over, virtually. Counseling can be effective. So those sorts of things are there. That's sort of the structured piece. In St. Louis County and in St. Charles County, the local union that covers this area, Local 2665, they offer a lot of these kind of peer-to-peer counseling opportunities. It can be they offer recently coffees that they have to come and sit and talk, and then of course the people that you work with. But ultimately, I think it's something that she should consider in terms of like, what do I do if? And what is available for me? And I think talking to an experienced provider at those places can really guide them in the right path.
Does the schooling and or training fully prepare one for what they will see on the street? We talked a little bit about this, but you can answer that again.
Yeah, that answer is a hard no. There's just no way to understand fully what the job is until you do it. And so you're in the beginning, you've got to take a leap of faith in terms of, I trust in myself and my support system, and whatever it is that holds you upright, that's going to be enough to get you through. And I think in a lot of instances, people go to that point. It is, but it's really no way to understand the job until you do it. And so I think going and riding along places or doing clinicals before you get too heavily invested is extremely important. And people either fall in love with it or they go, yeah, no way. I rarely see people that are just sort of sure that end up getting into it and have a career in it. You've got to have a passion for this job. Unfortunately, no, the book doesn't prepare you for the scenarios. And even your preceptors, when you're going through, they'll create these extravagant scenarios and you think, yeah, that could never happen. And then it happens, or something even more bizarre. So, yeah.
I think that was the majority of them. I think, they're concerned as parents, obviously, and you can talk about this with your own son getting interested. How do you leave that at work? And you can either explain that from your own perspective or what advice you would give to the younger generations and how they can achieve that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, my son, he's 23. He's getting into the service. He's got his paramedic license, and he's got a real passion for it. He loves the job. And it's exciting for all of us to see him kind of find his niche. But as a parent, you're always concerned because what's to come. And the advice that I gave him is the same, not to be cheesy, that my father gave me, and it was fairly simple. And it was before I fully committed to going into this. He just looked at me and said, if you're going to do this, you better have broad shoulders. And I kind of knew what that meant at the time a little bit, but as time went on, I came to understand that better. You carry a lot of weight on your shoulders, and you are called to something higher in the community and even amongst your people. So you have to be ready for, an upset patient or parent that doesn't feel like that you provided the care for them you did, or an officer or a medical director who's unhappy with the way things went. And sometimes the result is grief enough in itself. But yeah, you gotta have broad shoulders is what I would tell anybody. And that also relates to the physical part of the job too. You gotta be willing to take on the stressors from all sides in this thing.
That's great advice again, and I think that it's an amazing opportunity for you to share your wisdom with your son, and then also the younger generation. It's all happening at once, and you keep your pulse in many ways by having another family member and a generational viewpoint. I think that's pretty cool. It'd be neat to interview you and all have the same questions and see how you each respond based on your different generational differences. Is there anything else today that you'd like to share, or any requests of audience members that may lend some support to all the efforts you and your teams are putting out there for the community?
Yeah, I think that what I would want the public to know is that we're human beings too, and we are, the men and women that I work with. They're some of the smartest, most talented, gifted, strongest, and resilient people that you will ever meet, but they're still people. And I would just ask that the public have a degree of empathy for that. It's not to say that we don't know that what we signed up for, and we're here for a reason, and we're here to help. We're called to do this thing. we understand our stake in that. But yeah, I think it's important that the public understands that we're dealing with a lot of life and death each and every day, and that adds up over time. And we do this for them. We do this for the citizens that we serve, and our citizens from our district are incredible. There's rarely a time where I go by an engine house that there isn't a card on the table or some brownies that somebody brought by, and it's really, really great to have a community that's involved. So if you're in the community, whatever community you're in, be involved. Find out what's going on with your first responders. Look out for these fundraisers and the things that they're doing to try to help their folks, or organizations like Backstoppers, Responder Rescue, Code 3 Response. Those are just three at the top of my head that are local here that are just unbelievable in what they do for people and make our lives and that of our families better. So, yeah, that would be awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your commitment to our community and sharing your stories. I think the storytelling piece is so essential to providing the background of what you do and creating that empathy for people that are in your position, because at the end of the day, we're all human and we all face similar challenges. So
right.
Thanks again, and we wish you the best of luck moving forward.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
You've been listening to Life Beyond Loss, a podcast from Survival in the Trenches. If you'd like to get involved and help those struggling to cope with personal loss, visit us at our website, survivalitt.com, and follow us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast so we can continue to grow and reach more people in need. Together, we can make a difference.